The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship with Foyle Legal. For advice tailored to your situation, please consult a qualified legal professional. Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for understanding personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and claim the compensation you deserve.
Okay, picture this. You're walking down the street in Perth,
Right.
Just doing your thing, maybe not paying attention like we all do sometimes, and bam, you slip on a banana peel. Right,
Yeah.
and not just a little stumble, you take a real tumble. Twist your ankle, need physio, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Annoying, right? But now, imagine that same scenario, but instead of just a bruised ego and a sore ankle, it's something way more serious.
Okay. Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
It's like, what if someone's carelessness actually caused a major injury? That's where these common law claims come in. We're going to try to break it all down today.
Say.
We've got some really great info from Foyle Legal. They're a firm here in Perth. They really get into the nitty-gritty of common law claims right here in WA. Legal jargon can be a bit much sometimes, but we're going to try to make it crystal clear.
Looking forward to it.
For sure. So first things first, could you give us a simple explanation of what a common law claim actually is? Like, how is it different from just, say, relying on workers' compensation if you get hurt on the job?
Sure. Yeah. Common law claim can sound kind of formal, right? Basically, it means you believe someone else's negligence. In other words, they weren't being reasonably careful, and that directly caused your injury. And because of that, you're trying to get compensation that goes beyond what those no-fault systems like workers' comp can provide.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think of it this way. We all have a duty of care to each other, right? It's
Right.
like this unspoken agreement that we'll all act in a way that doesn't put others in unnecessary danger.
Right, makes sense.
So let's say a shop owner knows there's a spill, like our banana peel from before, but they just don't clean it up. And then you slip and break your leg. They've basically breached their duty of care because they knew about the danger but didn't do anything. You'd have pretty solid grounds for a common law claim there.
So it's not just about getting your medical bills covered. It's about proving that someone else was negligent and then potentially getting compensation for like lost wages, emotional distress, you name it.
Exactly. And as far as situations where this might apply, the information from Foyle Legal brings up some common ones, like, for instance, workplace accidents. But there's a catch. They mention a 15% whole person impairment threshold.
Hold on, whole person impairment. I think we need to unpack that a bit. What does that even mean in plain English?
Basically, it's a way to measure how bad your injury is, considering how much it's affecting your ability to function overall. A 15% WPI basically means your injury has to be serious enough, it has to meet a certain level of seriousness to qualify for a common law claim on top of workers' compensation.
Got it. So workplace accidents that have a really significant impact, those are on the table. What else did they mention?
Let's see. Oh, motor vehicle accidents. Stuff like if someone's driving recklessly or if dangerous road conditions cause an accident. And then there are the classics like slip and falls, just like our banana peel example from earlier. You'd be surprised how often those actually happen.
Right. More common than you'd think.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing those aren't the only situations where this might come up, right?
Yeah. What are some other scenarios where someone in WA might have a case for a common law claim? Oh, yeah, for sure. Those are some of the big ones we see, but it can go way beyond that.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, you've got things like medical negligence. Let's say you have a misdiagnosis and it ends up causing more harm, or there's a problem during surgery, something like that.
Yeah, that's scary to think about.
It is. And then there's product liability, where a product, it's faulty and it causes someone to get hurt.
Right.
And even things like defamation, where someone's reputation is damaged because someone else said things that weren't true about them.
Huh. I never would have thought of that one.
Yeah, that falls under common law, too.
Wow. It's kind of amazing how many different situations could lead to a common law claim.
It's a lot.
Speaking of which, let's talk about what everyone wants to know, those payouts.
Okay.
The info from Foyle Legal gets into some detail about what determines how much someone might actually receive if their claim is successful.
Right.
It's $1 million question, isn't it?
It really is. And unfortunately, there's no easy answer, no magic formula.
Right, of course not. So what are some of the biggest factors that come into play?
Well, first and foremost, the nature and severity of your injuries. That's going to make a huge difference. I mean, a broken bone is one thing, but say like a whiplash injury. Those are going to be treated very differently when it comes to figuring out how much they'll impact your life.
Right, like if you're a construction worker and you hurt your back, you might not be able to do that kind of work anymore, which would then affect how much compensation you could get.
Right. Exactly. And that's why things like age and life expectancy also play a role.
Oh, right, that makes sense.
A 25-year-old with a really bad injury that prevents them from working their job, they could be looking at millions of dollars in potential lost earnings.
Wow.
Compared to someone closer to retirement age with a similar injury, they might end up with a smaller settlement, even if their medical costs right now are pretty much the same.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and on that note, we have to think about medical expenses too, both past and future.
Right, because it's not just about the bills you have now, is it?
Exactly. Serious injuries, those can require a lot of treatment, maybe ongoing therapy, rehabilitation, maybe even changes to your home so that you can get around. Those costs can really add up fast.
And the emotional side of things, too.
You're right. That's a really important point. Pain and suffering, that's definitely a factor as well.
It's hard to put a price tag on that, though.
It can be. It's definitely more subjective to try to quantify. But the law does acknowledge that there's a cost associated with the physical and emotional distress of an injury. It's not just about the money.
So let's say someone listening is thinking, okay, this all makes sense. What if I'm actually in this situation? Like, what are the steps to actually making a common law claim?
Yeah.
It can all seem pretty overwhelming, but I know Foyle Legal actually outlines that process, especially for those workplace injuries and motor vehicle accidents we were discussing earlier.
It's definitely understandable to feel overwhelmed by the idea of anything legal. Having even a basic understanding of the process can really help.
So walk us through it. What are the key things people need to know?
Okay, so for a workplace injury in WA, let's say you've been getting those workers' compensation payments for a while and your injury has stabilized. Now, if your impairment, that WPI we talked about, if it meets that 15% threshold, you can choose to go for a common law claim. It's not automatic.
So what do? Just call up a lawyer and say, hey, I want to make a claim?
Well, it's a little more involved than that, but talking to a lawyer early on is always a good idea. Basically, you would need to lodge specific forms with Work Cover WA, which is, the governing body for workers' compensation here.
So Work Cover WA is like the gatekeeper for these types of claims.
Exactly, yeah. They handle those initial stages. And a big part of making your case is gathering evidence.
Like what kind of evidence are we talking about here?
It could be anything from incident reports, witness statements, photos or videos of where the accident happened, things like that. Medical records are crucial, of course. Got to prove those injuries. And in some cases, you might even need expert opinions.
Expert opinions? From who?
Could be from medical professionals or maybe workplace safety specialists to really demonstrate that your employer wasn't meeting those required safety standards.
So it's not just about saying, this happened to me at work. You need to be able to back it up.
Exactly. And for car accidents, it's a slightly different process. Usually starts with sending a letter to the at-fault driver's insurance company, a letter of demand. This letter basically spells out your injuries, how they've affected your life, and the compensation you're asking for.
Okay, so it's like putting your cards on the table.
Kind of, yeah. This is often what kicks off those negotiations. And again, this is where having a solicitor on your side can be super helpful.
Right, because they speak the language, so to speak.
Exactly, yeah. They know all the ins and outs of the law. They can handle talking to the insurance company. They can really work to get you a fair outcome.
It sounds like that legal guidance can make a world of difference, both in terms of understanding what's going on and potentially getting a better result.
Definitely. Trying to navigate it all on your own, that can be really tough, and you might not get the best outcome.
And one thing I found interesting in the materials from Foyle Legal was this idea of limited and unlimited common law claims. Sounds kind of, I don't know, like something out of a video game.
I know, right?
But I'm guessing it's a bit more serious than that. Can you explain what that's all about?
Yeah, for sure. That's a really important distinction here in WA, and it all comes back to that WPI threshold. Remember we said you need at least 15% for a common law claim for a workplace injury.
Yeah, the magic number.
Well, it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
If your impairment is, say, least 15% but less than 25%, you qualify for what's called a limited claim.
Okay, so what's the catch? What's the limitation?
The limitation is on how much money you can actually receive in a payout. Right now, that cap is set at, well, it's a little over $500,000.
Oh, yeah.
But, and this is the important part, that amount includes any workers' compensation payments you've already been getting.
Wait, so it's not like an extra $500,000 on top of what you've already received?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it? But unfortunately, no, it doesn't work that way. So let's say you've been getting those weekly payments from work cover for a year, and those payments add up to, let's say, $50,000. If you then settle your limited common law claim, the most you could get on top of that is $450,000.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It is.
That's something people really need to understand.
They do, because if your injuries are really serious and you've already been getting quite a bit in those weekly payments, you could hit that cap pretty fast.
That's a good point. So then what about these unlimited claims? They sound a bit more straightforward.
You'd think so, but they've got their own set of complexities too. Basically, unlimited common law claims, those are for the most severe injuries. We're talking a WPI of 25% or more.
Okay.
And like the name suggests, there's no upper limit on how much you could potentially get.
So someone could theoretically be awarded, what, millions of dollars in compensation?
It's possible, especially if they have ongoing medical expenses because of those injuries, if they can't work at all, or their quality of life has been massively impacted.
Wow.
The whole idea with unlimited claims is to try to acknowledge that these kinds of injuries, they can have huge lifelong effects.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier that not all of these cases actually end up going to court.
Right.
What's the deal with common law settlements?
Yeah. So a common law settlement, it's basically just an agreement, but it's an agreement that's reached between the injured person and whoever has been found responsible for their injuries. And that usually means dealing with their insurance company instead of battling it out in court.
So it's kind of a way to bypass the whole court thing?
It is, yeah. And it's a way to resolve that claim without all the time and expense and uncertainty that comes with going to trial.
So it's like finding a compromise that works for everyone.
Exactly.
What kinds of things influence whether or not a settlement actually happens?
Well, a lot of factors, really. The evidence is a big one. If one side has a really strong case, the other side might be more willing to settle because they don't want to risk losing at trial. Then there's the cost of actually going to court, which can be really high. And there's always the chance of appeals, which can drag things out even longer.
Right.
And of course, both sides have to be willing to compromise. If they're not willing to budge a little on what they're asking for, a settlement's a lot less likely.
That's a lot to consider. It really highlights why having that legal expertise in your corner can be so valuable.
100%. They can really help you figure out the best way to approach the situation.
Absolutely. So for anyone listening who might be thinking about going it alone, maybe reconsider that.
It's always best to get some advice.
Well, we've covered so much ground today, from those WPI thresholds, limited and unlimited claims, the settlement process, everything. It's a lot to take in.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just tuning in, maybe after your own little accident, what's the main thing you want people to walk away remembering?
You're right. It's a lot. I think the biggest takeaway is this. If you think you might have a genuine common law claim, don't try to handle it all by yourself. Get some legal advice early on. A good solicitor can really make a difference.
It's like having a guide in unfamiliar territory.
Exactly. Someone who knows the lay of the land.
I like that. So consider this your crash course in common law claims here in WA. But as always, if you're dealing with this in real life, reach out to those experts, get that personalized advice. And on that note, we'll leave you with something to think about. We've been talking a lot about the impact of these injuries on the individual, their ability to work, how much compensation they might get. It makes you wonder, what about the other side of that coin? What about the impact on businesses, the people who are potentially liable for those claims? How do they deal with these situations? And how do these legal frameworks affect the decisions they make every day? That's something to chew on. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Thank you for listening to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal. We hope this episode helped clarify your rights and next steps in your injury claim. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and visit foylelegal.com for more useful information. See you next time.